Hey everybody, welcome to the most exciting panel you've ever seen. I see we have a lot of really impressive Bitcoiners here, amazing people. And then there's me. Yeah, I got it. They asked me 2 days ago to do this panel. Lisa called me up, she said, do you want to do a panel on covenants? And I said, what are covenants? So, I can't really move this, can I? Can we move this? Let's get rid of that. Let's show everyone's face.
Oh, now we're doing it. All right.
All right, guys. I go by Jusneth. Many of you know me, most of you don't. Some of you are my friends, most of you aren't. But today we're just going to talk a little bit about covenants. So we're going to structure this panel. It's real simple. I want people who are watching at home and anyone in here who, there's probably actually not anyone in here who's in this position, but people here anywhere that don't really know what covenants are to get a quick overview of them. And then we're going to proceed into a little bit of discussion about the differences between all of the proposals. I'm going to have them talk about the advantages, disadvantages, and then in the back we have a little pool. I'm going to bring it up here at the end, and Rindell and Rusty are going to wrestle in the mud with their shirts off. So I think we'll just start at the beginning. When I started this, I really didn't know much about covenants. I've said this for a while. Many years ago, I was very online when it came to Bitcoin, and I would watch absolutely everything. And I think many of us are still like that, or many of you are still like that. I am not as much like that as I was. So when Lisa asked me to do a panel on covenants, I had to go watch a lot of Andrew Polstra videos and a bunch of other people talking about them online, and learn as much as I could about them to do this panel and talk to you guys as if I had any competency whatsoever. So here we are, and I'm excited to do this. So let's talk a little bit about like what covenants are. Let's do like 3 or 4 minutes on that, and then we'll move on to the rest. All right?
Sure.
Great. Rindell, you go.
Yeah, so in Bitcoin script, we normally have a way to encumber coins on a set of conditions or predicates that apply to the inputs of a transaction. So you can say, you're allowed to spend these coins if you can produce a signature or if a time lock has elapsed, but you don't really have any ability to control where the coins go or how they're spent into the future. And having some conditions about the future spending of a UTXO is what covenants are. And then all the rest of the discussion is what's the right shape of a covenant, what are the kinds of systems that we want to build with covenants.
And I would say covenants can be even more general than that. The most common thing we are talking about in Bitcoin right now is those future output restriction covenants, but you can envision other kinds of covenants too. This is just the current conversation is focused on those. But actually the CCV covenants can also be input facing and apply additional, more fine-grained restrictions to inputs. So covenants can go either direction. It's just the most common thing that we're looking at is currently the output forward-looking covenants.
And I'm realizing as a moderator, I've shirked my responsibility. Let's introduce everyone first. All right, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. So let's start here with Brandon.
I'm Brandon Black. I work at Swan. I also go by Reardon Code on the Hellbird site, the ex-Hellbird site. I've been working on Bitcoin self-custody full-time for about 6 years now, so the reason I'm here talking about this is better self-custody options.
Yeah, I go by Rindell on Twitter. I'm the CTO at Taproot Wizards. We're known mostly for making illustrated children's books and occasionally non-standard transactions. Used to work on self-custody, currently working mostly on CAT and kind of covenant research right now.
I'm Johan Halseth. I do open source Bitcoin development at NIDIG, and I'm currently researching and developing use cases using covenants, and my preferred one is check contract verify.
There's a fan.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Hi, I'm Rusty Russell. I'm a lightning person. What am I doing here? Lisa was running this conference, and I said, oh, cool, I'll talk about it. She said, it's about script. And I'm like, I will turn up and I'll talk about script. And that's how I ended up on this panel.
Yeah.
I'm just here to listen, really. They didn't even give me a mic.
That's true. So there's a...
Well, it's a multi-party mic, and you have to control who's allowed to use it.
So based on the explanation, I mean, so covenants basically are the thing that allows us to program, let's say like when you put Bitcoin into a wallet, that money is sitting there, and you can program things like, I think the vault is probably the most specific example. You can say this money can only be spent if it goes to this address first. Is that the?
Yeah.
So that's one way that you can script it. So covenants allow you to do this kind of behavior with Bitcoin.
Yeah, it all, as they said, it allows you to kind of like restrict where future spend of the coins, what restrictions there are, and there also an extension to that is that you're able to actually carry state from input to the output, which is very, very useful in many situations.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, the term covenants, because of the output restriction thing, and it's not really just covenants, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
We think about it at a script level as introspection. You can ask things about the transaction that's happening now and ask, and query stuff. And that's very, very limited today in script. And if you open that up, you can do all these cool things. So covenants are kind of a side effect of the mechanism, which is introspection.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to like poke on that a little bit more. If you haven't spent a lot of time with Bitcoin script or trying to implementing things in Bitcoin script, you might intuitively assume that you can do things like inspect the value of an output, or inspect the destination of an output, or know what the sequence number was for one of your inputs. And you don't actually get access to that kind of state in script. And so, with the ability to introspect those values, you can start building more complex applications.
Yeah. The cool thing is you almost get the ability, and if you add a couple of things and squint sideways, there's a good talk coming up about this.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
In like an hour.
So we've talked a little bit about this too. So can we do a little bit about the history of covenants? Where do they come from? Like, where do they start? This goes back to Satoshi, right?
I mean, covenants are a legal thing. Oh, sorry. So covenants are a legal thing where when you sell something,
I guess I mean scripting in Bitcoin, like covenants in Bitcoin,
right.
like opcat.
You said go back.
Yeah.
All the way back.
You place the restriction as you can buy this, but you can only sell it to whatever, or things like that. They're often used for evil legal purposes, but they can also be used for sane ones. So it was Imran Gunsara, wasn't it, who came up with the idea of was it covenants him? I think it was him who originally proposed this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
for vaults.
for vaults, they needed covenants.
They needed covenants so that you could do this inspection thing, and then it kind of took off from there. So that's kind of the history. And then we get into the whole, how should we do it? And there are like that, I guess, is why we have a
And that's where Polstra gets into
But
it,
back
is the how.
back when Bitcoin was first designed, Satoshi had like a number of things that would have allowed you to do these scripts in Bitcoin. Correct?
That I'm not sure it was deliberate. It's just, there was a programming language, right? And it turns out you could do an awful lot. When you create a general programming language, right, people could do anything with it, right? I mean, that is sort of fundamental to creating a general programming language, right? And it turns out they can do some things you can't expect. And one of them was we would have had the ability to do.
Well, I think we can say that Satoshi didn't add introspection, but
Not
he
explicitly,
had,
yeah.
not explicitly, but it had cat, and
With cat, you can do
you can do it.
Could you do it
in
without
certain
Schnorr?
ways. You could do it with ECDSA as well, but
it's a
very
lot cleaner with
complex.
Schnorr, but you can technically do it with ECDSA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But I don't think Satoshi added covenants and introspection
Right.
on purpose. No.
So we're hearing about CAT. CAT is one of the proposals on the table currently for covenants. What are the others? Like, I know, Brandon, for example, you're into a different one.
Yeah, so I really just picked up what Jeremy Rubin had been working on with Verify or CTV, and the observation about CTV is that it's like maybe too constrained. It does too little in the covenant space. So I bundled it up with checksig from Stack and internal key to make what I call L-enhance, and I consider that the kind of minimum useful set of let's get covenants into Bitcoin. That's kind of what the debate is. What is the minimum useful set of getting covenants into Bitcoin to make good new things? Because I think Rusty put out his talk earlier, let's not make bad new things.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you can do it with Opcat. You could do it's amazing. Like, I'm really impressed, and I'm looking forward to your talk.
Yeah, it should be fun.
But yeah, it's also a little bit of just because it shows how clever you can be doesn't mean that you should be.
I mean, it's really like a Swiss Army knife kind of situation where you can do everything, but it's not optimal for any of those things.
So Randall, you're the most controversial person on this panel. You're
I don't know about
bit of a
that.
shit coiner.
I don't know about that.
a shit wizard?
I think a lot of the opcat discussion in current days has been tied in with the ordinals and the inscription discussion. So you're the opcat guy on this panel.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about opcat, which is sort of the oldest of these protocols.
Yeah, we want to bring it back.
And
There's a song.
I heard. Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about that. Just tell us about opcat.
Yeah, I mean, so opcat was Satoshi wrote it, right? You take the song says you take 2 data sets or elements and you put them back into the stack. So opcat, we want to bring you back. So it's just concatenation, but there's a trick that Andrew Polstra figured out in, I want to say 2021, wrote a really great blog post called Cat and Schnorr Tricks. I'm going to be giving a talk about it later today. And it lets you, you can basically construct a specially formed Schnorr signature on the stack just using cat and SHA-256, and then you do check sig with it. And if that check sig is valid, then it means that the message that you put into the Schnorr signature is valid over the transaction. And that lets you get different components of the transaction onto the stack, and then you can start doing comparisons with them. So if you wanted to build a covenant where you say, these coins can only be spent to this destination, you bake that destination into your script, and then you pass in all the other components as witness data, you assemble this signature, and then you call check sig, and if it's valid, then it means that the coins are going there. And you can kind of pick and choose which components of the transaction you want to have be fixed and which ones you want to be variable. So you get more flexibility than something like CTV, because you can say, I want my
throwdown
first, let's get the mud.
It takes 20 cats to do 1 introspection, though.
That's true, but they're 1 byte each, so, whatever. A big cat transaction is like 300 V-bytes, that's not even 1 wizard, it's fine.
And that is a critique of opcats by a lot, is that it's ugly, it's big.
Yeah.
It's not space constraining.
It's not efficient. It's not specialized. So I think part of the argument to do something like opcat is that it's so generic that we can let people go and build whatever they want, and then we can look at what people are actually doing with it. And if we see that everybody's using it to do a vault, then we say, all right, let's put in a specialized vault opcode that does that one thing really, really well, and we optimize this use case and claim back some chain space. So I think that that's the reason to do CAD, is that it's very flexible. We're not trying to predict what the market's going to need particular covenants for. We just say, here's a generic building block that you can use to build lots of stuff, including things that we haven't thought about before. And if we see that there's economic demand for specific shapes of covenants, then we can specialize that and get more optimized versions.
Does its flexibility make it dangerous?
I don't think it does.
You don't think?
No.
No?
Rusty says no.
All right, no. Johan, let's talk, you're Op CTV guy, right?
CCV.
Just CTV.
CCV. Check contract verify. Yeah, so check contract verify is opcode proposed by Salvatore, that's here as well, as part of the Merklei's All the Things framework. And with that, we're also using a lot of cat, because Merkle trees in script are pretty great. So you can build and modify Merkle trees, and for that, cat is very great. But in addition to cat, we have this CCV opcode. And the thing I like about it is it's so simple. The only thing it does is just takes, you specify an input or an output, and then you check what's the taproot key in this input. So you can check what's the root hash of the tap tree, and you can check what's the internal key, and you can optionally you can check if the key is tweaked with some data. And you can do that on the inputs and outputs, and with that you get a lot of power, because you can commit to arbitrary state in an input, then you can do some computation on that state, and then you can commit to the altered state in the output. So that lets you carry state from the input output and build state machines and build, as I'm going to talk about in my talk later, very complex computation into very simple operations in Bitcoin script.
So you like the limitations of CCV?
What is that?
You like the limitation that it's very limited
just that
and kind of
it's very
exactly
simple.
what you want.
People are always afraid of modifying the script engine in Bitcoin, but CCV is not many lines of code, and it's just very simple, very concise, very easy to know what it's doing. That's one of the reasons I like it.
Well, it's also nice because it's not introducing any new assumptions to Bitcoin, right? Like I think a lot of people would really like a ZK verifier opcode, but that brings a whole bunch of like new cryptographic assumptions.
Yep.
We already do a lot of key tweaking in Bitcoin, so having like what's effectively a tweak verify opcode is kind of one way to think about CCV. Is like that's something that we already depend on.
And it turns out with the building block like that, you can actually do ZK verification because you could build scripts
without like
from
sticking
this.
it in the script interpreter.
Yeah.
The thing worth pointing out here, I think, is that CCV needs cat to be super useful. And cat can do everything that CCV can do, but it's uglier. So putting those two together is probably better than doing just cat, in my opinion. Because if you do just cat, you're going to have a 30 cat script to do what CCV does. But if you have CCV, you have a 1 CCV and 2 cat script. And that's a much easier thing to reason about when you're building things for Bitcoin.
No, we were at dinner last night, and I had to keep Rindell and Brandon away from each other.
Yeah, they were gonna. Kept calling my scripts ugly.
But Dusty,
But also, no one but Rindell is going to be able to understand these things, right? The rest of us are going to have something that generates them for us, and we'll just believe it.
we'll pay Rindell.
yeah.
Rindell, you're going to be a very rich man.
Rusty's just like revealing my business model right now. This is.
Without a secret. Oops.
Yeah.
Dusty, I think what I thought you would be great at talking about is you don't have a horse in this race for the most part, right? You care about Bitcoin, you care about scripting, you care about a lot of like things being done right. I thought maybe you could give us a little bit about like the philosophy that you've developed about scripting and the way you think about this problem in general.
Firstly, that's not fair. I think everyone on this stage
Who won?
cares about things being done right. I think that this was so we had a bit of a chat yesterday, and I think it was really good because everyone's focused on they have their particular angle that they come from, but everyone was very focused on what's the best thing we can do. There was no and you can debate what's best, right? That's the nuance. But there was no one, kind of going, no, we need to do it this way because I invented this and therefore it is golden, right? It was all on the table, and I think that's fantastic. So I don't think I have a unique perspective there. I think everyone shares that, which is why it's so much fun to watch these guys.
You might be the bravest, though.
Am I bravest? I don't think so. I think
I think you're the wisest, Rusty, among these guys.
I'm just that's a way of saying old, but thank you. No, I do think that to step back a bit. Look, you can't control the world, right? You will do the best thing you can, and sometimes it'll just all fuck up, and it'll be terrible, and blah blah blah. But you can't just you can't assume that. I have always assumed in my engineering career that if I build the best thing I possibly can, that is the most useful to the most number of people, good things will happen. And that's worked for 30 years, so I'm just carrying that philosophy forward. And I think that, there'll always be haters and there'll always be people going, oh, whatever, there'll be a lot of noise, but that's not a good way to live. You can't live in fear of that. You've got to go, cool, what do I think is genuinely the best thing we can do here? What's the best engineering decision? And that's step one. And then step two might be like, oh yeah, but no one's going to like that, so maybe we need to. But step one needs to be purest engineering thought. Like, what is the best thing that we can do that is consistent with with the stuff we're already doing, and take all these things into account. Like, how risky is it? Does it introduce some new assumption, or is it just straightforward engineering?
This is how I buy appliances, by the way. What's the best dishwasher? What's the worst one? What's the one that everybody uses?
Yeah.
No, it's interesting because I think that sort of principle matters a lot, particularly Bitcoin's kind of a big tent. So all of you guys want the same thing, kind of different things in different ways, have different reasons for it. Is there a world where only one proposal ends up getting through the bit process? Is there a world where all of them kind of get through the bit process? Is there a world where nobody gets what they want, or everybody gets what they want?
Isn't that putting the cart before the horse?
Yeah.
You can't try to. No. There are enough people in the world who will come at it from a political angle. What's politically possible? What's palatable? All that shit. I don't know. I'm a fucking engineer, right? I will write the best thing that I can, and hopefully enough people will feel the same way. That is the best thing, and it will win. But there will be a shit fight, whatever you do, right? So you might as well just do the best you can, and I think that is kind of where we're headed, right? I think in the end, we produce a system which we're happy with, we're proud of. People don't come, why did you fuck this up? And I'm like, oh, because there was a committee or something, or there was flames on Twitter, so that's why we didn't implement it that way, and now you've got to live with it forever, right? No. I don't want to be on my deathbed going, fuck, we're still using 32-byte pub keys or whatever.
I think there's about striking a balance there, right? Because we can try to make the best thing possible, and it can be great engineering, and then it can be something everybody wants. But if it never gets into Bitcoin, then we haven't done anything really. So it's about trying to build the best thing possible, but in such a way that it'll actually move Bitcoin forward and be accepted into the Bitcoin protocol.
Yeah.
And I think that's where maybe we disagree.
Yeah, I think another thing, right, is you have to get users to run the software. Like, you can implement anything, and at the end of the day, people have to run a forked version of Bitcoin to, activate whatever the proposal is. So people have to have a reason to do that. And I think most users of Bitcoin are going to want to upgrade Bitcoin because it enables some new capability or application or something that they want to do with their money. And I think a little bit of where the bike shedding might have gone a little too bike sheddy is trying to come up with what are the tools that are close at hand, and then how do we use those to construct a thing that maybe people want to use. And that's kind of backwards. What we actually need to do is say, what are the kinds of things that people want to be able to do with programmable money, and then work backwards from there and say, what is the safest, most reasonable, most general set of changes that we can build into Bitcoin that will enable all of these things so that people want to run it. And I think if we're trying to engineer okay, well, we've got a bit here, we've got a bit here, we've got a bit here, how do we combine these, and maybe somebody will use this construction, I just don't think that the network is going to want to upgrade to that. I think it really has to be kind of demand side driven instead of supply side driven.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. There's definitely use cases that you can identify. But I'm always conscious of the stuff we don't know, right? There are use cases we don't know. People come with new ones, like I look through the schedule, I've never heard of that. Oh yeah, well, where have you been for the last week, right? I mean, there's stuff happening all the time.
That's what you said to me last night. I had some great ideas for Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I'd had some drinks.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so yeah, to some extent you need to know these things, but also if we do manage to engineer something that we feel has the generality we need, that'll do this, it's possible that actually people do something else that's even more amazing.
Well, I mean, perfect example. Yesterday we were having a conversation about sig hash flags, and I think a bunch of people in the room assumed that oh, this set of sig hash flags is all that everybody will need, but right now there's a lot of usage on the network that's using sig hash single anyone can pay, and that's a combination that hadn't really seen new use until new market activity happened, and so you really can't predict this stuff.
So, question for you, Rusty. How do you know that there's no unforeseen consequences of expanding scripting with Opcat? How are you so sure?
I'm counting on there being unforeseen for circumstances. Can you hear me? There's going to be cool stuff.
So other than the cool stuff, I just mean like maybe Bitcoin breaking type problems or something like that. How do we know that? What is it that makes you so certain?
Well, I mean, as an engineer, I have to answer we don't. There could be a bug sitting in Bitcoin right today that would blow the network up, right? We do the best we can. We try to make sure that we've covered everything. You get a lot of really smart people looking at it before you deploy it, not after, to make sure that it's straightforward. But there's Cat is pretty simple. This is an important principle. People can do dumb shit today, and they don't need our permission. They don't need any soft forks. They could,
like Taproot Wizards.
Yeah, I know that.
Or BitVM and BitVMX and all the other things happening.
It turns out they can do, but there was a thought experiment that I really should trace back because I keep using this example, where somebody creates a lottery based on the block hash at a certain height, right? And this lottery becomes huge and it's worth billions of dollars and it's way more important than Bitcoin. And it completely fucks over Bitcoin because all miners do is reorg that single block and we just die. Because Bitcoin becomes a thing for this lottery. You can do that today, and you could always do that on Bitcoin, and it's always a risk. People doing dumb shit with more money than you is a problem, right? But it's not a problem we can solve. However, people trying to do smart stuff that is really useful, that is a problem we can solve. We can give them more tools. So, I think that we've got this problem today of idiots with too much money. And if you have a solution, that's awesome, but I don't.
Well, I mean, or another example is the classic covenants FUD for a really long time was that, the state will use covenants to encumber your coins into like a whitelist, blacklist system where you can only spend your coins to somebody who has a social credit score or something. You can do that today with a 2 of 2 multisig where the authority runs a policy server. There's actually a product on the market that does exactly this for registered assets. It's called AMP.
Blockstream AMP.
Yeah. So you can do it now, right? So like people don't need your permission to go and do evil things with Bitcoin.
That's right. And what's interesting actually there is that you don't want that. Like if you're evil government and you're trying to control it, you don't want
Covenants.
Like, you don't want to nail the conditions in today, right? Yeah. Because you might need to disavow someone later, and you need to tweak the conditions, right? So you really want a signature server, right? And you can do that trivially.
Yeah. And I think relatedly, with everything in engineering, there's also the risk of unforeseen consequences of doing nothing, because if we don't do something like Covenant, I'm a self-custody advocate, and we're very limited how many folks can self-custody Bitcoin right now. Like the Lightning paper originally said, we would need 133 megabyte blocks to get most people able to use Lightning. Well, that's not cool. I'm not going to make 133 megabyte blocks. That's a bad engineering solution. So the doing nothing is the most dangerous thing. And so we should do something.
Yeah, that's fair.
To that, I just wanted to go back. Like, Brent, we haven't touched a lot on the L-enhanced stuff. Like, it enables some Lightning stuff that the other protocols don't, right? Is that?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I actually wanted to mention, CAT can do almost everything, but one of the things it can't do is Lightning symmetry or L2 channels, as they're previously called. And I think that's a pretty valuable use case. I came up, and in my talk later, or tomorrow, I'll mention, I think you can do something that's kind of like Lightning symmetry with CAT, but boy, is it ugly. So there are trade-offs. Even CAT, as magical as we all used to think it was, can't do everything.
I mean, it can do a lot. I'd pick a vault over LN symmetry any day of the week.
No, I wouldn't. You see,
No.
Absolutely, because
Actually, I don't want to have to pick. I want to let people build what they want to do, and then they can pick.
Yeah, no. From a Lightning perspective, we will always
Sure.
assume that we would get LN symmetry, and it cleans up a whole heap of stuff in the protocol.
And what is it? LN symmetry? What's the
LN symmetry? So at the moment, we have what's called retronymed into LN penalty, which is that you and I have a channel. If you screw up, I take all your money, and I have to react to that. In LN symmetry, basically, you screw up, I just fix it, right? And that's really interesting because the you screw up, I take all the money doesn't work with three people. Like who takes the money? How does that work? What happens, right? The fix it case does. And so suddenly you've got multi-party channels really easily, but it also means you haven't got this toxic state, right? Previously,
symmetry, same you state on both sides.
Yeah, it's symmetry, hence the symmetry argument. But yeah, currently today, it's like if you can get fooled or accidentally whatever, restore your backups, old things, whatever, put an old state on the chain, you lose all your money potentially, right? Because they can use the penalty mechanism, right? It's almost too much, right? Whereas if all they can do is fix it up, they can get annoyed at you, and maybe there is some penalty component you sew in there that costs you a little bit. But it's not this toxic waste that we have today.
The Deus Ex Machina of Lightning. We take it. What's that?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's important. I talk a lot about Lightning symmetry when talking about L-enhance because it's a protocol that has documentation that I can show. Yep. Here's an implementation of Lightning symmetry using L-enhance or any prev out. But the idea of rebindable symmetric channels lets us do, as Roastbeef just said, multi-party state updates. There's a lot of other stuff you can do once you have this symmetric channel construct.
And symmetric channel constructs are the symmetric channel construct you're describing is something that only L-enhance, at least at this moment, is of the protocols.
Of what we're talking about right here, yeah. I mean, obviously, Rusty's script restoration does literally everything that we've talked about.
Yeah, I think one of the maybe confusing things here as well is like most of these Covenant proposals, like TX hash, CAT, check contract verify.
And how many are there at this point? Like 400?
There are many. L-enhance, yeah, there's a lot of them.
Any prev out would count as one if you want to squint a bit.
And upvolt, you can do surprising stuff.
I was getting coffee this morning and I just made up a new CTV variant.
Yeah, exactly.
But the surprising part is that most of these actually enable sort of the same
kind
things.
of the same stuff.
Yeah, so you can show that with one of them you can emulate the other one, and with that one you can emulate a third one. So I think the discussion is a lot about like how easy is it to reason about this opcode, how easy is it to actually use it on chain, should we be able to do this thing very efficiently and compactly, or should we need to do this emulation to get what we really want? So it's about striking the right trade-off between complexity and usability of the proposals.
Is it worth talking about what you guys spoke about yesterday then, and the idea of the script cleanup and everything?
Well, it was Rusty's whole talk this morning, right?
Sure. Yeah, so my talk this morning. I mean, I think there's, okay, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but I think there is an appetite to go, you know what, let's just, if we clean everything up, then we've got a much nicer base to work on. And then we go, cool, well, once we've got a really clean mechanism of doing this stuff, you know, there's a handful of things that we can add. Because the cleanup itself actually gives us opcat, so it gives us, you know, covenants, so let's just round it out, right? Let's just do some sane, simple things. You know, yours would be 2 opcodes now, because tweak add and then verify. So I don't know, we can have that debate, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, it does then let you just simply express what you want to do, right? In straightforward script without having to jump through hoops. And I think that's actually pretty appealing to everyone. So I think there's a consensus that if we can do that, then we should go for it. We should maybe just write the cleanest thing we can and figure out what that is. Now, there are so many details and things to argue about within that subset, yes. But Christian's experience with AnyPrep out, and he's giving a talk on this, is, you know, he tried to create this absolutely minimal sliver, but accidentally realized that then it opened up covenants because you could put a signature, you know, whatever. And then, like, it's very hard to do a tiny thing that doesn't open this door to, oh, now you can use this to emulate all the other things. And then you're like, well, now we have to fight. Like, who's going to win?
And I guess that's kind of what we learned over the last couple of years is that whatever improvement you do to Bitcoin script, you're going to get covenants somehow.
Yeah.
So
You're going to get covenants, you're going to get Hashford escrows, and so we should do something better rather than trying to do this little nitpicky, like, how small can I make it to avoid all these things? No, just do something good.
Yeah, do something good. But also, I think what's interesting has come out is that we want this, right? It's not just an obscure, like, oh, maybe he vaults, maybe you don't really care, maybe you don't believe it, whatever. But there is just an increasing, mounting number of things. You're like, actually, one of these is attractive, surely. Like, for different people, it's different things, right? LN symmetry for me, but, you know, it's vaulting is the thing for other people, and, you know, there are a whole heap of really cool
and
things.
timeout trees and
That's right. It's like, you know, there's a new one every week. And so I am sure that, you know, increasingly confident there is really cool stuff in there.
CatVM.
And what are
CatVM.
what are the downsides?
We have to do the work.
Well, that's a downside for you. But what are the downsides?
There's a lot of
for
bike sheds that need to be painted, which is actually, like, I think that's one of the reasons why I've been doing a lot of research on opcat. It's this much code. It used to already be in Bitcoin. You know, yes, some of your scripts are a little bit chunkier than maybe they would be if you have an optimized opcode for it, but it's so small that its surface area for bike shedding is smaller. Right, like it's something that people can wrap their heads around and say, okay, well, I'm not making a trade-off of this set of covenant cases versus this one. I just get the Swiss Army knife. So, you know, that might be a way to kind of cut through some of the bike shedding. The thing that's nice about script restoration is that you get that, but you also get, like, multiplication, which it turns out is very useful in computers. Like, it'd be great to multiply things together. Who knew? You know, better numbers, like, all these things are useful. I think the big downside is there's a ton of engineering work. If we do script restoration, there's a variable ops budget that we need to build out and model, and we need to do a lot of benchmarking and simulations and, like, make sure we tune the parameters correctly so that we don't, like, blow up somebody's Raspberry Pi. So, you know, but it's not rocket science, it's engineering. Like, we know how to solve all these problems, we just have to go do them.
Yeah, I think a lot of people talk about this, like, what's the risk to Bitcoin with doing covenants? I already said my piece on that, really, that the risk of not doing anything is huge.
Yeah.
But also, a lot of the risks people talk about are kind of like, I'm afraid that someone's going to build something really bad for users using this. And I think that, at least in the conversation that we were having yesterday, it's really useful to think about, okay, they could build that really bad thing. If we give them an option to get the same functionality in a good way that doesn't have these negative consequences, they're much more likely to build a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly where Rusty's script restoration is so powerful, is that it opens up a wide swath of good ways to do things that then gives us the space to say, hey, I see you building a dumb thing. Why don't we build this better thing that's going to be better for users and not have any risks of existential out-of-band payments to miners is like one of the examples of bad things that can happen. And that's why that was a really important part of Rusty's talk earlier, that using the script restoration we can start building these things that discourage out-of-band payments to miners. Whereas right now, we can see that out-of-band payments to miners are kind of starting to become a thing. Let's see what we can do to undo that problem, so we can reduce risks by changing.
What would that look like? How would you reduce out-of-band payments to miners using covenants?
There was a talk, dude.
There's several ways. Like, op sponsor is my personal favorite, although Rusty prefers stacking of transactions together. It doesn't really matter.
I don't know. I was writing my slides and I'm like, I'm starting to like op sponsor a lot more. That's total bullshit. I don't really care.
Yeah, me neither.
The
point though is that you can take several people's transactions and pay the fees for all of them in one transaction that appears on chain. And so the transaction fee is still relayed through the global public relay network. There's not an API with a miner you pay that fee through. And that's the important thing, is that we've made a way that's inexpensive because you put many transactions together, pay one fee for them, but it still goes through public relay. So we're not paying straight to miners.
So this is really important, because why would you do this? It's technically slightly more expensive than paying a miner directly, but you enter into the open marketplace, so you can low bid, right? So you're actually better off using the mempool. So that possibly gives you enough advantage to outweigh the fact that you've got this one extra output in your 100 stack or whatever.
Well, I'll give you an example. We've been talking about you can do things that are harmful today, and we want to enable people to build things that will economically outcompete the harmful things, right? Like the two solutions to everything in Bitcoin are economics and Merkle trees. You just throw them everywhere. And so, a thing that you could do today with zero changes to Bitcoin. There's now new token protocols on Bitcoin, so you can shitcoin on Bitcoin. You could build a little sidecar where if you do a Bitcoin transaction and have one of the outputs be an anyone can spend output for some rune, token, a miner could pick that up, include it in a block, and claim the runes. So you could actually pay mining fees with a token that's not Bitcoin today with zero consensus changes to Bitcoin. I think that's actually way worse for miner incentives than adding a covenant that lets you do sponsorship or something.
Yeah.
It's bad. That's really the thing.
If anybody wants a hackathon project to completely destroy miner incentives, talk to me later and I'll tell you how to build gasless transactions on Bitcoin using runes. It'll be great.
Yeah, and on the danger of not doing anything with Bitcoin, I would add that I think one of the problems we see today is also a centralization problem, is that it's hard to do self-custody. So we kind of agree on that we want to do something to enable self-custody or make it easier. So something like Upvault makes sense in that regards. And then it turns out, maybe surprisingly, that Upvault actually enables more general covenants. Okay, so it enables general covenants, so maybe we should do real general covenants that does this properly. So everybody can build proper things, and including vaults.
Cool. I think we have a lot of technical people in here who probably have questions that they'd love to ask you guys. So what if we move on to the question phase? Is that a good idea? Yeah? Okay, cool. Yeah. That or the mud wrestling. Is there a microphone that we can give them?
There is not.
There's not.
We'll repeat.
Yell it.
Just repeat the question, please.
I will.
Rusty, something you mentioned is that over the past couple of years, we've learned that we actually do want covenants. Why did it take so long to realize that?
So why did it take so long to realize we wanted covenants?
People are slow.
On-chain fees were low.
Yeah,
Usage.
Yeah, actually, that's fair. Fees were low. Dude, don't worry, that's tomorrow's problem, right? And suddenly tomorrow's problem is today's problem. I think there's some of that. Ideas take a while to percolate sometimes, right? Particularly, I've noticed that bad news tends to get attenuated really fast in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Bullshit that sounds positive, wow, that spreads. But it does take a while for rising fees is going to be a problem for self-custody. That message is in the white paper. Not quite, but it's trivial to extrapolate. Everyone knew this, but suddenly people are aware of it. And yeah, I think it just takes time for these messages to get out, and people go, well, we need an answer.
And I think actually Taproot made a huge difference in how people are thinking about covenants, because earlier, if you had complex covenant schemes with recovery paths and everything, it turns out, the scripts are huge,
script,
right?
Yeah.
And then we got this Taproot update that makes it possible to split the scripts and make it smaller and hide them and do all kind of nice things from that perspective. And it turns out, okay, we've had a covenant in here as one of the paths, and I could do these amazing things. So I think Taproot helped just progress the discussion and get people thinking about covenants again.
And also just the engineering aspect of here we are in 2024, we're really just starting to see concrete usage of Taproot. So in a sense, Lightning itself is a covenant. And so now we have Taproot channels in Lightning where the force close paths are hidden in the tap tree, as John was just saying. And so that's now a thing, and that makes more apparent how we can benefit from covenants because the engineering has been done. So as Rusty said, like there's work we have to do, and engineering has to keep moving forward.
Real quick, so in the last year, I've noticed that there seems to be a lot more businesses being built in Bitcoin that are using the scripting in Bitcoin. Maybe I just have been oblivious to it, but is that true? Are there more businesses now that are starting to utilize the Bitcoin scripting than there was before, and why? Why is it happening now as opposed to previous?
That's a really good question. I don't know.
Miniscript is part of it?
Yeah, Miniscript, like we've got better tooling, but what came first, chicken or egg? People want to do things in script, so we got better tooling so people can do more things in script. I think it just takes a while.
I think also Taproot makes it actually cheap to add more scripts to an output. Yeah. Earlier it's like, I can add some complicated script here, but it will be expensive, so nobody will use it, so let's just not do it. But
so
now we can actually...
Taproot gave us Miniscript and Taproot Wizards.
Well, Miniscript existed before. There is now Tap Miniscript.
And now there's a lot more businesses using script on Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's true, though. There are a lot of businesses. To me, that was a really sort of interesting observation the last couple of years. I've just seen more and more businesses that really do rely on the scripting in Bitcoin, whereas before I felt like people were using Bitcoin as money or as something very simple. But it's interesting to see sort of the complexity of businesses come up while scripting is being used more often.
Which also answers the previous question of why covenants now? And the answer is that people are actually starting to use script a lot more now, and now they're banging their head against these arbitrary limitations that were replaced. So I think that it also feeds into the why covenants now.
So Shinobi, is it you?
I just wanted to ask Ringo why he...
Oh my God. Ryan, Shinobi wants to know why you hate Bitcoin.
Oh, I don't. That's why I spend so much time making so many Bitcoin transactions. Because I love it.
He does make a lot of Bitcoin transactions.
Do you think Bitcoin could evolve towards an app with covenants from the beginning?
So the question is, do you think that Bitcoin could have developed to where it is now if we had had covenants at the beginning, at the outset?
Because we did have covenants at the beginning, so the answer has to be yes. Yeah, but no, I think we're always going to go through the stage where most people were just sending money and happy with signatures.
Yeah.
Before it got to the point where people had to really, there'd always be some, people would have played perhaps a bit more than they did, although people did some weird shit.
We talked about it earlier, I think if you remember, Mike Hearn's Lighthouse was I don't know how many covenants it would, you could say it used, but it was an early sort of scripting product, and there were other stuff that people had tried back then.
It is interesting to think if we had the ability to do some kind of velocity control. I don't want to say vaults because that's too specific, but some kind of velocity control for funds. I bet the wallet ecosystem would look radically different than it does today.
Oh, see, I don't think it would.
You don't think so?
I think
signatures.
Well, Bitcoin hasn't been worth anything until now.
That's almost true, right?
Yeah,
it's true.
I don't know that people would have cared until now.
I remember sending a friend 7 Bitcoins because he bought me a sandwich. And I don't remember what the fee was back then. It was probably half a Bitcoin. It was just Bitcoin.
Probably zero, actually.
It could have been zero.
Well,
too.
the whole wallet ecosystem is really around proactive security, and you have to make sure that nobody gets to your keys ever or money gone, right? And if we had some ability to do flow control, or if you have a vault system where you can claw your money back, then you don't have to be quite as precious with that one set of keys.
So Green Wallet, it kind of is this, right?
Sure.
We do that. And demand is not as great as you'd think. You'd hope that it's coming in the future, but for now, people are like, I still have all my Bitcoins on my phone. And I just, I upload it to Google Drive. What's the problem?
Do you have all your Bitcoins on your phone, Rusty? And are carrying it with you now?
They're all in Google Drive.
That's right. No, all mine were in Mt. Gox.
No Gox.
Whoever, I was going to call over here, but I guess I'm not seeing over. Let's go over here first. Vic. Okay.
Have any of you thought of half aggregation or the interactive full aggregation in conjunction with your proposals?
So have any of you thought of half aggregation or full aggregation in conjunction with your proposals? I don't know what that means. So can you explain what it means first, and then
I'll explain, and then I'll take an answer if we thought about it. So half aggregation would be, you have your signatures, they're normally 64 bytes long in Schnorr. You can combine the the nonces and keep the S parts separate, I think. No, you have to combine the other one. Hey, whatever. You combine half of it, so each signature takes 32 bytes instead of 64, and that makes your transaction smaller. And then full aggregation interactively is essentially similar to Music 2, if you've heard of that, which you can use for plain key aggregation, except that it would be across the different messages that different people have signed in the transaction and do it interactively. So you save the full signature. You basically have a transaction that has no signature cost to it, except for one for the whole transaction. And these are great because they would encourage things like coin joins, because the more inputs you have now, the cheaper your transaction gets. So we thought about it?
Has anyone thought about it? Yes, obviously, yes. So half aggregation is relatively easy because it's non-interactive and you can just set things up and you can go. There's some really rough code that I've seen to do it. And you can do that for you can do that in proposals where you end up with a so multi-party computation. You end up with a transaction holding their signature that could possibly be half aggregated. Maybe I haven't. Perhaps. It definitely cannot be fully aggregated because that requires interaction, and they've gone away. That's why you're trying to spend this. So it won't be used for all, it won't be used for all Bitcoin transactions. It simply can't. But for the normal, I just want to send some Bitcoin case, you could totally go full signature aggregation. But that said, we're still waiting on a lot of engineering, and I think there's theoretical work to make sure that it's actually sound.
Yes, and the thing with half aggregation is that while you can do it, you're only saving 32 witness bytes per signature. And in terms of percentages, your transaction weight isn't really reduced in a high percentage. So it is a worthwhile thing to consider down the road, but when we're looking at more trying to amortize the on-chain transactions, make them less frequent, using things like multi-party lightning or CatVM or BitVM or whatever, all of these things are let's make fewer Bitcoin transactions. And if we're talking about saving with half aggregation 4-ish% of our transaction weight, do we care? Is that the highest priority relative to enabling the reducing of transactions in the first place?
There's definitely lower hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And for space savings, you can say that some of these introspection proposals actually gives you the possibility to do this because you can share signatures across inputs, right? So you can have a script that just like fetches the signature from some.
Or there might be applications where you just don't need a signature, or you need fewer signatures or something.
Yeah. So you don't have to like duplicate the data on all the inputs.
So I guess the answer is yes, but we're thinking about it, and it's probably less beneficial than some of the other things we can work on first, even though it's so interesting to think about.
So go to the beautiful mustachioed lady over here.
You guys managed to kind of like elegantly nudge the MEV spooky conversation.
You're not Shinobi.
What's that?
You're not Shinobi.
No.
Can you actually speak on like why the fear around MEV might stem from confusion over the approach to building of applications on Bitcoin versus other chain where all of the computation happens, on chain, on other chain, and then we're trying to get that out of the main chain on Bitcoin.
So basically, you're saying we've avoided the MEV conversation so far. Can we have it? Sure.
MEV is a lie.
Well, I think what we mentioned earlier, like whatever improvement you do to Bitcoin script, you're gonna get some sort of covenant or maybe MEV from it. So I don't.
We have this issue already today. Like you could you
definitely
create some
have-
protocol that builds on Bitcoin that MEVs it. Like
You definitely have MEV. I think Counterparty is probably the oldest example of MEV on Bitcoin, where people are paying to get these little tokens that aren't Bitcoin moved around Bitcoin, right? And they're paying little minor fees to do that.
And I guess ordinals as well. There's an
Bitcoin
MEV.
invented MEV in some ways,
Yeah.
right? Which is kind of an embarrassing thing given how we've critiqued it on Ethereum. But yeah, we've done it for a long time.
But I think in a lot of cases you can build protocols just smarter. Like don't do that. If you care, don't do it.
Yeah, something that's interesting is like usually MEV, highly exploitable MEV that's really exploitable by a miner or a validator is usually the sign of a poorly designed protocol, and the users of your protocol are losing value to the miner or whoever the MEV extractor is. So if there's two protocols in the market and one of them exposes their users to having value siphoned off by whoever the sequencer is or the block producer or whatever, and another one doesn't, then that other one should, in a reasonably fair market, outcompete the one that exposes its users to MEV. So I kind of see a lot of the classic MEV scenarios as just being symptoms of badly designed protocols that just need to die or be outcompeted. And I also think it's worthwhile to remember that we have like 10-minute blocks, and that there's different games that people are going to play on Bitcoin than they play on other networks, and we shouldn't let a abstract specter of MEV stop us from building the things that people need to do on Bitcoin.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is a subset of the stupid people with too much money problem.
So as the moderator, we have time for one more question. So who's going to pay the most to be in this next block?
And he does take out-of-band payments.
So I'll let roast beef will have a good question, but roast beef, can we have someone translate?
Yep.
I got 13% of that. So someone.
The question is best extension mechanisms for adding things to Bitcoin script. Is op success the new thing added in TapScript, or is it the op nops? By using op nops, you get the access to bare script as well as TapScripts and also to SegWit v0. So what's the best way to extend script going forward?
It's case by case. I mean, my general thing is, for God's sake, put it in TapScript. But also, we need to remove the internal key penalty for TapScript. That kind of goes without saying. Once you've done that, they're kind of basically on parity, right? Taproot at the moment, you basically need to put a dummy key in, even if you don't want it. It's 33 bytes, right? So if you get rid of that, solve that somehow, then they're kind of on parity. But then, yes, there are special cases where.
Yeah, opt-out, you can't opt.
Yeah, well, some things you can't, or
And
cat
some
verify.
things,
I don't know.
Cat verify. Yeah.
oh God, too many bytes.
Imagine all the bytes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think unless there's a compelling reason, you abandon old script as like that's in stone and move forward.
And to give an example of a compelling reason, so CTV itself makes sense to do as a verify because you can make a bare CTV that is now literally the most efficient way to constrain future outputs because it fits into a 33-byte bare script the same way that you used to be able to do like a bare pay-to-pub key. And that's an extremely efficient way to constrain that with no witness needed to spend it at all. Other things don't make nearly as much sense. There's a conversation about roast beef right now about whether checksync from stack verify makes sense as an op or not.
I think we're done. Do we have time for one more?
JB55.
I'm being cut off.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you guys thought of any type of data that you can introspect that would cause problems down the line if you use a certain type of introspect, a certain type of data with your introspect.
If you were to do global introspection beyond this transaction, I would be like,
Yeah.
Like, what's the limit? Like, how far can you push it? Like, can you go to like
Chain introspection.
just the data within that?
Well, a block-header introspection would be really useful for some
That would be
protocols.
super useful. What's that? Yeah.
There has been thought on this, but I have just left that door firmly closed. It's not necessarily that there's not good stuff behind it. It's just that, there is a whole new universe of problems that I have not thought about.
Yeah, I think most discussion these days is about transaction-level introspection, and I haven't really. I don't think that any serious proposal goes beyond that.
So if you want to come to my talk later, there is a fun trick that you can do with Cat to carry state forward where you can kind of look back on the previous transaction. It's expensive, and there are some limits on how much you can do, so it's not infinite. You can't, keep hopping back all the way to Genesis or something, but you can, look at kind of an uncle output in the previous transaction and use that to carry like a state commitment forward. That ends up being really, really useful for like building finite state machines where you want to be able to like choose the tap leaf that you're going to fire based on what a previous state commitment is. It doesn't give you, arbitrary introspection into somebody else's transaction unrelated. I mean, maybe you could do it with like an SPV proof or something, but then you have like SPV assumptions. The thing that I think is worth remembering is that in Bitcoin, We don't have the ability to like write to arbitrary global state in somebody else's transaction. So a lot of the weird, re-entry bugs and other problems that you see in other blockchains are because everybody has, global state that you're able to mutate, and the ordering of that can get bad. So it's still Bitcoin.
All right. Give him a hand.
Thanks, guys.